Time and again, despite superior numbers, superior territory, and formidable arsenals, Arab armies have failed to decisively defeat Israel. How does a much smaller state consistently emerge victorious or at least undefeated against multiple opponents? This is not just a story of arms, but of systems, strategy, politics, and identity. In this documentary, we will explore the systemic reasons behind the repeated military failures or stalemates of Arab armies versus Israel. It is not enough to say, Israel is better. We will break down why. Over the next 12 to 15 minutes, we will define the structural disadvantages in economic, social, and political domains. Trace how historical legacies and external interventions shaped these weaknesses. Compare with global benchmarks. Illustrate how these problems cascade under battlefield stress, and examine a recent tipping point in these conflicts to show how the pattern still holds today. By the end, you will see that the failure is less about individual battles than about deep strategic dysfunction. I propose dividing the core into three interacting axes: economic resource constraints, institutional and social deficits, and political and strategic dysfunction. Each axis helps explain facets of the repeated underperformance. On paper, Arab states have often had impressive budgets and manpower pools, but Israel's defense spending is extremely high relative to its GDP, and its economy is more diversified and technologically advanced, enabling more efficient absorption of military expenditures. The Arab states often purchase large numbers of foreign weapon systems, but sheer numbers do not guarantee integration, maintenance, logistical support, or timely upgrades. Many Arab systems sit idle without spare parts or skilled technicians. Wars are won not just on the day of battle, but in supply chains, repair, ammunition, resupply, fuel, and throughput under fire. Israel's internal lines, smaller geographical footprint, and continuity of infrastructure give it logistical advantages. Many Arab armies struggle to maintain deep penetration logistics during offensive operations. Israel invests heavily in domestic defense industries, drones, missile defense, electronic warfare. That allows faster iteration, adaptation, and autonomy. Arab militaries are more dependent on imports from foreign suppliers, making them vulnerable to embargoes, delays, and political constraints. Sustaining high-intensity conflict can strain national finances. Arab economies, often more vulnerable to fluctuations like oil volatility, foreign debt, social welfare burdens, such economies can't sustain large-scale military mobilization over extended periods as easily as Israel, which maintains a resilience in defense spending even in peacetime. This axis probes the softer but critical factors: leadership, trust, training, doctrine, and coherence. As Kenneth Pollock argues in Armies of Sand, one of the recurrent failures is in the performance of lower-level officers. Promotions are often by patronage or political loyalty, not battlefield merit. They lack initiative under stress. A recurring criticism is that Arab armies fail to coordinate their branches effectively. The infantry may advance while artillery support is delayed or misaligned. Air support may not be synchronized. This lack of cooperation is most visible when battle conditions deviate from plans. In contrast, the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, have long stressed integrated arms doctrine, battlefield agility, and joint training. In Arab military culture, there is often a deep caution about trusting other units, even allied ones. This is partly cultural, emphasis on tribal, familial networks, and partly institutional. Fears of coups, internal divisions, regime surveillance. When maneuver requires trusting flanks or trusting support, hesitation occurs. Many Arab militaries adopted Soviet or imported doctrines without fully internalizing them. Their forces sometimes rely on massive artillery barrages or frontal assaults rather than maneuver warfare, deception, or flexible tactics. When enemy terrain, intelligence, or surprise intervenes, rigid doctrine is exposed. Arab armies often lack regular, large-scale, unscripted exercises. When they do exercise, it's sometimes for display for visitors rather than rigorous stress tests. Units are not tested under uncertainty. In contrast, Israeli forces constantly train under unpredictable simulations. One of Israel's greatest strengths has been deep intelligence penetration into Arab states and forces. Pollack and others argue that Israel often had prior knowledge of Arab deployments, doctrine, and even staff-level plans. The Arab states often fail at secure communications, compartmentalization, deception, or operational security. Soldiers' morale is stronger when a war is seen as legitimate, with clear objectives, good logistics, leadership care, and societal support. When the war is seen as driven by regime survival or disconnected from public purpose, morale suffers under casualties, attrition, and delays. This is the outer shell that exerts pressure on military execution. Regime politics, alliances, external interference, and strategic coherence. Many Arab states deeply politicize their militaries. The military is seen as an instrument of regime security rather than national defense. That means promotion, procurement, and command decisions are filtered by political loyalty, fear of generals becoming rivals, or ethnic and sectarian balances. That undermines meritocracy and bold command decisions. Conversely, Israel's military is institutionally autonomous and more insulated from political interference in operations. Arab states often enter coalitions or joint campaigns, as in the 1973 war with Egypt and Syria. But coordination is weak. Different chains of command, poor communication, distrust, hesitancy to commit full force, redundant or conflicting mandates. The lack of a unified command undermines combined operations. During the Cold War, Arab armies depended on Soviet advisors, doctrine, and arms. Israel benefited from U.S. support, but its internal system resisted dependency better. Sometimes Arab aid came with strings like restriction of usage, delayed delivery. Also, external powers sometimes prioritized influence over military effectiveness. Often, Arab states entered wars with unrealistic objectives, like a total defeat, reclaiming territory. They underappreciated Israel's capacity for deep strikes or lightning counterattacks. When initial momentum failed, they lacked fallback strategies or political flexibility. Some Arab states had to defend multiple borders or projects. Israel, being smaller, often concentrated forces and used interior lines to pivot. Arab states sometimes committed conflicts elsewhere, diluting focus. Arab leaders often had to balance external diplomatic pressures like from the US or the Soviet Union, or risk escalation beyond their comfort zone. For example, a nuclear dimension or a US intervention. That limited bold military options. In the 1973 war, Egypt, Jordan, Syria fielded far more aircraft, tanks, and troops than Israel. But Israel launched Operation Focus, destroying much of Egypt's air force on the ground in the first hours, securing air supremacy. Israel's agility, intelligence, and combined arms integration allowed it to rapidly invade all fronts. Arab forces were caught off guard, communication was poor, and coordination among armies faltered. Arab forces achieved tactical surprise and early gains along Sinai and Golan. But once Israel mobilized reserves and counterattacked, the Arab momentum couldn't be sustained because of logistical overreach, intelligence surprises, lack of integration, and political pressure to halt escalation. One main reason why Arab armies fail in combined operations is the lack of hands-on training. Western armies invest heavily in combined arms doctrine, training in uncertainty, mission command, delegated initiative, professional officer corps, and domestic defense industries. The U.S. or NATO forces typically operate with robust cohesion, redundant logistics, real-time communications, and ability to manage risk. The Arab armies often lack these enabling conditions. Egypt, after 1973, introduced military reforms including better training, doctrine, U.S. partnership, though still with limitations. Jordan, though small, often punches above weight in coordination, partly due to institutional discipline and political stability. These Arab armies have paid the cost and taken the consequences of military setbacks, as following repeated defeats or stalemates erode public confidence, feed societal disillusionment, and produce large casualties and refugee flows. When the military fails, the ruling regimes often face internal dissent or legitimacy crises. Resources funneled into expensive but underperforming militaries could have been invested in economy, health, education, which weakens a country's long-run resilience. The repeated narrative of Israel always wins can demoralize populations, undermine strategic deterrence, and tilt diplomacy. Current crisis point or tipping point. To show that this pattern is alive and evolving, let's look at a recent critical juncture. The ongoing Israel-Gaza War, 2023 to 2025 era, and lessons for Arab state militaries. Israel's sophisticated intelligence, drone warfare, precision airstrikes, electronic warfare, and networked command have placed asymmetric dominance over non-conventional forces and non-state. Actors Arab states watching the Gaza war see how Israel projects power with minimal ground risk and overwhelming tech integration. The gap between conventional Arab armies and Israel's hybrid operational model is widening. Some Arab states, although not directly engaged, have responded with rhetorical support, limited sanctions, or symbolic gestures, but few have pledged real military lifelines or joint action. This conflict highlights that Arab militaries are increasingly sidelined from confrontation. The battlefield becomes a domain for special ops, proxies, drones, and cyber domains, where Israel currently holds dramatic asymmetry. This war is thus a tipping point. It exposes the diminished relevance of massed Arab army formations in face of agile, tech-savvy, networked warfare. We return to the central question: why do Arab armies repeatedly fail against Israel? It is not because of lack of courage or will. The root lies in structural misalignment, economic inefficiencies, social and institutional deficits, and political constraints. When war arrives, these cracks open into chasms. Israel, by contrast, benefits from coherence, integration, autonomy, institutional legitimacy, and the ability to adapt. That said, this is not a fatalistic narrative. Arab states can reform, invest in local defense industries to reduce dependence, restructure civil-military relations to insulate merit-based command, emphasize joint training, doctrine reform, and decentralized command, prioritize intelligence, cybersecurity, and asymmetric domains. Focus on narrow, realistic strategic goals rather than maximalism. In the evolving global military landscape, small states or medium powers can win, or at least not lose, if they can think differently about war: speed, information, precision, agility. For many Arab militaries, catching up will require more than new tanks and planes. It will require systemic transformation. The continuity of defeat is not destiny. But reimagining military power is not easy. It demands bold leadership, political will, patience. If Arab states can undertake that transformation, the future need not mirror the past. Thank you for watching. If you found this insightful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your feedback helps us improve.